Okay. Is everybody starting to sink into their food coma? A little carb download, overload. Get a chance to let for people get back in here.
Oh, you got a clock up there. That's helpful.
Yeah, I always love it, especially when you're doing a keynote and you're like, we need to stay on time for 55 minutes, and you walk in and you're like, you got a clock? Do you think I've got one that yeah. So I always take my own clock wherever it is I go. So we try to stay on time and respect that. So, all right, guys, one of the things that Andy wants to do throughout the next 9 workshops we come together is a chance for everybody to kind of share their origin story at a high level, share what information they want to share. He'd approach Jim and ask him to do that right after lunch. And so we're going to start with that, and then we'll take off. So let's get a little energy going. Let's give a big round of applause for Jim. Let's go.
Andy said he's going to have everyone kind of come up and talk a little about their connection, origin story to Accel. 5 to 10 minutes. So for those of you who don't know me, Jim Column in the Burridge office in legal compliance. I was thinking, then I felt like, shit, I feel old. I've been an attorney for almost 20 years, and I started, and I can't believe that I'm here today, which I'm sure many of you feel that same way. No connection to gaming, no kind of real pull toward gaming, but just this is where I ended up. And I started out as a young attorney. I worked for Chicago Police Officers Union, represented Chicago police officers through a lot of investigations. As a young attorney, it was great, but we do a call sheet for the next day and be like, here's the layout of all the cases that we have to do, and here's where we have to go and meet with internal affairs. But then if you were on call, you could get a call at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and you have to go show up to help out officers with, shooting, domestic, some situation that just was pretty intense of what it was. And it was great. I learned a lot, and it was grinding, and I was ready for something else. And my next step was I moved into state government, and I flipped the switch completely of the heavy, work with police officers and dealing with law enforcement. And I was with a department through Illinois that dealt with film tax credits. So I literally went from life and death to getting film credits for making Batman movies and Transformers and Shameless. So it was kind of a great little step in that direction. But I also, even at the time, didn't have as much work to do with those projects. And then it filtered into kind of almost my first connection to an Accel person, which was Emily Madsen, which some of you may or may not as outside counsel. When I was with the state, we did clemency work, and we did a lot of clemency backlog projects for the governor's office. We developed a relationship there. She was at the Illinois Gaming Board, and then this thing called video gaming got introduced, and she's like, we need help, we need lawyers, we need bodies. I'm like, sure, Emily, I'll do this with you. So I went to the gaming board with her. We're like, what is this video gaming? At that point, I had never even played a slot machine in my entire life, and tried to develop the rules and regs for video gaming here in Illinois. Some of them are still in place today, good, bad, or terrible. But we kind of started at the ground floor from the regulatory level. And even through there, I met Andy, and I met Derek, and I met Mike Pappas, Mike Lecca, a lot of the early players that you guys know that are now part of the Accel family as a regulator, and got to know them and hear from them and listen to them. And I'm glad Andy's not here because I don't want to boost his ego, but his perspective was interesting because a lot of the guys that we dealt with were former gray gamers, and as law enforcement, those guys broke the law. They were guys that didn't follow a regulatory structure. And we had Accel, we had Andy, who had a different perspective, and it was always interesting to hear kind of his perspective, what he had to say. Still got 2 minutes. So my time
Take your time.
My time at the gaming board, I ended up being at the state for about I know exactly how long. I was there 9 months, 9 years and 7 months. And I was it was time for me to get off the ship, and it wasn't me getting off at port. I had to literally jump off the ship for another story for another time. But I fell into a law firm that did a lot of regulatory work and worked with a lot of the clients that Accel competes with today. But a lot of good companies, a lot of people that we all know and work with now. And one of my clients was Grand River Jackpot, and I did a lot of work with them, basically everyday stuff with them, operations, employee matters, regulatory work, and our friend Bruce Banks talked to almost every single day. So at some point in 2017, 2018, Accel bought Grand River, and we went through the transition from my side of giving everything from Grand River to Accel, and losing a lot of close contacts on the Grand River side was going to be absorbed with Accel. And once we closed that deal, Derek asked me, he said, hey, would you ever consider working in-house for Accel? And I was like, I didn't really ever think about it, and it just wasn't on my radar. I'm like, I appreciate you making that offer, and it's just not the time for me to do something that I like the law firm. I like feeling like an attorney practicing. And again, having interactions with Accel, but not as regularly as when I was at the gaming board, and certainly not as regularly when I was interacting with the Grand River folks, for example. But Derek then called me up a few months later. Just crazy how these things kind of continued to morph. Accel was looking for a board member and was interested in T. Robinson. And Derek felt comfortable enough, even though a lot of ways Accel competed with the clients that I represented, that he came to me and said, what do you think about D? He knew that D. Robinson and I worked together for a number of years at the gaming board, just wanted an honest opinion. And just the connection from him to ask me about that and talk about it was another kind of bridge between the time that I spent with him when I was a regulator and the interactions we had kind of over the years. So a few years later, and this was after COVID, Derek asked me again about, hey, would you be interested in leaving? And at that time I kind of thought to myself, we didn't know where the world was. I didn't know about going back into Chicago in an office. I didn't know what the environment was going to be. And I talked to Mark Stevens here. I talked to Lucy, who was another former colleague of me and mine at the gaming board. Talked to Bruce Banks, and everyone raved about Accel and in the opportunity, about doing it. I still wasn't exactly sure, but I had lunch with Derek, and I just felt like going to work for him and seeing what kind of the team he was trying to build, it was worth the opportunity. And so ended up coming to Accel basically 3 years ago, July 1st. So this is and I told him the other day, it's gone so quickly, but we've done a lot, and it really has been a great opportunity. And it wasn't just the individuals that I met. There's so many more people throughout this company. There's so much talent, and I really truly enjoy the people that we work together. And I really do think that it's been interesting to watch it go from just Illinois-based to basically nationwide, and how we've been able to kind of hollow that together, figure things out. But I love it. So that's my story. I hit 6 minutes, but I don't know if there's anything else that you want me to bring up or raise, but that's kind of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's give it up. So much value in hearing these stories and just understanding where people are coming from, how they got here, hearing that journey. And when we look at the next session and the sessions that following, taking advantage of that networking time, getting to know each other. I'm sure the tables will continue to change everywhere we go. I know Karen was talking to me over lunch talking about the interesting stories and journeys just at her table. So that's what it's about, right? Lean into those relationships. We're in a space where we don't have to wonder, is somebody interested in getting to know us or learn more about us or connect with us or share, because that's the space we're in. So let's try to take full advantage of that. So here in a little while, I know Andy is going to be back. He wants a little bit of time to talk about a couple things, I think related to Tuesdays with Maury, which is the first book assignment. So he'll talk about that. And so we've just made a few adjustments in time in our schedule. We're at 5, we're done, right? So we know that. But a couple of things in your book, like, hey, we didn't go through that, we didn't cover that, that's intentional. And we'll come back to things that we need to come back to. Does that sound okay? All right. Emotional intelligence, a foundational component of self-leadership. But what is this phrase? What is this combination of words? What is emotional intelligence? What does that mean? I'm not going to let you fall asleep.
To navigate through your highs and lows, your thought process, your decision making, your reactions or lack thereof, and in a positive way, getting to a better place.
I like that. You're talking about being able to navigate those highs or lows, those emotions, those ups or downs in a positive way. Being aware of them. Being able to mitigate some things so we show up how it is that we want to show up. Who else? Who wants to add on to that definition?
Situational awareness.
Situational awareness. Can you give an example?
Just understanding the folks you're dealing with, the lay of the land in the room, where everybody else is coming from.
Love it. Who else? What do you understand emotional intelligence to be?
Maybe not letting your emotions get in the way of making the right decision.
Not letting your emotions get in the way of making a right decision. Very well said. How do we remain objective? How do we always lean into our values and our principles? How do we not get emotionally hijacked and let somebody else or some other situation dictate and control how we show up? I think emotional intelligence really is about knowing ourselves so well, understanding our triggers, what drives our passion, what motivates us. Being very aware of the energy we bring and our body language and the different ways that we communicate. And being in complete control of those things at all times. Being able to maintain our composure in the most difficult of situations. To be able to make the decisions that keep moving us towards our goals, our objectives, the things that we're passionate about. And that can be really, really, really hard. Especially when the people making decisions or people you're interacting with violate our values, violate our beliefs, violate our expectations of how we'll be treated. But the important thing for us to remember as we navigate those emotions, as we navigate these interpersonal relationships, as we navigate conflict, is that we never, ever want to react. We always want to respond. When we react, somebody else controls who we are and how we show up. When we respond, we are very deliberate and intentional about our response, about our decisions, about our actions, and we show up as who we want to be. And there are times that we will show up and we'll demonstrate emotion. There'll be times that we make withdrawals intentionally in our leadership bank account because it's a time we need to do that. There will be times that we'll leave a negative emotional stamp and drive negative emotions in people. But those times should be few and far between. One of the greatest examples recently I've seen of emotional intelligence, of this never react, always respond, is Caitlin Clark. Anybody here know who she is? Anybody here following her journey? it is hard to fathom and believe, even with everything that I've seen through my career, that somebody who never says a bad word to anybody, who always takes time to sign autographs, who by all accounts is a great team member, could become the focus of so much controversy, right? So much jealousy, so much envy. I just don't remember a time when Jordan came in, when LeBron came in, when Kobe came in, Steph Curry came in, that it being this nasty. I don't remember a time that somebody was waiting just to receive an inbounds pass and their team member hadn't picked up the ball and somebody attacked them from behind. You just don't see a lot in the game of basketball, somebody coming up from behind when you're going in for a layup, nowhere near the ball, taking your head off. But in spite of all these things and all this conversation, she rises above all of it and she stays grounded in who she is. She doesn't allow other people to put words in her mouth. She doesn't allow people to turn the narrative. She's not giving out sound bites for other people's causes. And for this 22, 23-year-old who everything she does, her microphone is always on, to have that kind of composure and presence, I think is an incredible sign of self-leadership and emotional intelligence. And I think that example really brings to life, regardless of how bad the day is, of what's going on at home, regardless if your boss comes at you in a way that isn't appropriate, regardless if one of your team members says something or sparks you in a certain way. How do we maintain our composure? How do we make the decisions in spite of those negative emotions to keep us going in the direction that we're so passionate about? And how do we understand the impact of our words, actions, behaviors, body language, energy on the emotions of others? That is emotional intelligence. And I said it earlier, and I want to say it again. And it's something I mention at least once every time we get together with the collections leadership team. We need to be aware and intentional about the emotions we are driving in other people. And I said our microphone is always on. Like once the words come out, we can't get them back. But it's so much more than that because our body language is always on. Remember, communication is 7%. Just got to turn this back on. So there are different models. People use different quadrants. Last year, when we went through this with collections over this past year, through other partners that I work with, this looked a little bit different. But as I've done more and more research and continue to grow in my own leadership and my own ability to work with people, these are the 4 quadrants I've settled on at this moment in time. Self-awareness, self-regulation, those haven't changed, social awareness, and relationship management. And so we're going to walk through these 4 quadrants. Some of them will hit a little quicker at a higher level. Some of them will take a deeper dive into. What I want you to do really quick is I want you to turn to page 26. Thank you very much. And I want you to take a few minutes to complete this emotional intelligence assessment based on these categories. And originally, we were going to work through these and do some small group stuff. We won't on this because of the time we want to spend on Clifton Strengths and emotional triggers. But I want you to complete this, give it a little bit of thought, because one of the ways that we build and grow our emotional intelligence is we have a conversation and sit down with people that are close to us, that we trust, that we can be vulnerable with, that we can ask for help. And so one of the things I'll challenge you to do when this is over is to take a blank copy of this and have that trusted person, for me it's our assistant city manager, Matt Heckman, complete that and see how you guys align. Because so many people believe they are self-aware, but a lot of us don't truly know how it is that we're showing up. We meant to show up this way, but we really missed the mark so bad, and people didn't even recognize the person we thought we had shown up as. All right? So just take a few minutes, complete this, and then we'll move into the next thing. Everybody completed that? All right. Self-awareness. Let's start by asking a question. What percentage of people believe that they have good self-awareness? What's the number? 90? 80%? 75? 33%. According to some research that's out there, 95% of people believe they have good self-awareness. If they took a lie detector, they would pass. They actually believe this. So what is the amount of people, according to the research, that actually have good self-awareness? 33%? 10? 25? 5? This is funny, but when I show you the number, I don't want you looking around pointing at all the people in this room that don't have good self-awareness. Only 10 to 15% of the people in this research project actually have good self-awareness.
What is good self-awareness, or what's that measurement?
Well, I don't know what they used in the project, but how they believe they show up is not how they show up. How they believe they demonstrate empathy isn't how they demonstrate empathy. They report that they're great listeners and they're not great listeners. They report that they've got their emotions completely under control and they fly off the handle all of the time. There's varying degrees of it. But it was interesting to see, because honestly, I think most of us recognize and realize that emotional intelligence, we're all on a journey to become as emotionally intelligent as we are, and we all try to show up in a certain way. But generally, it's the people that raise their hands that say, I've got great emotional intelligence, I know exactly who I am, that you look at and you're like, does somebody have a mirror? Can we live? I remember being at this awesome, dynamic leadership training. It was front edge at its time, years and years ago. And I'm taking all these notes. And I'm there with 5 or 6 other people from our organization. And we take a break, and I'm energized and charged, and this is great, and blah, blah, blah. Like, what are you taking notes for? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, this is what we do all the time. This is what we do. And this probably wasn't good emotional intelligence. But I looked at him and said, do you actually think you're doing this? And I started laughing. I know it was really bad. I was like 25 years old, all right? Give me a break. But the consensus amongst this group that I was with was that we were doing all these things, and we just weren't. When we talk about social or emotional intelligence and self-awareness, I want to ask you a quick question. Are you a thermostat or are you a thermometer? Are you a thermostat or are you a thermometer? When you walk into a room, do you set the energy and the temperature of the room? Or does your energy, your emotion, go to the level of the room? Because as leaders, we have to be the thermostat. Leaders set the tone of the organization. And so as we do some of this reflection, how are we showing up? When we drop the kid late off to daycare, you hit every light on the way to work. You've got a ton to do that you didn't get done the day before. You walk in drained. Are you infecting the culture with that energy? Or are we figuring out different ways to be able to show up and still set the tone and that energy? Second question I want you to think of is, why do you want to lead? Because why you lead will directly translate into how you lead. Why you lead will directly translate into how you lead. If you want the title, if you want the money, if you want the status, if you want the perks, which if anybody's figured out the perks, can we meet afterwards and you can share a few of them with me? But why we lead directly translates into how we lead. And so in the final hour, we'll talk about our personal leadership mission statement. I know a few people have completed them before. But think about these questions, how we're showing up, and think aspirationally, how do we want to show up? But before we can answer or create our personal leadership mission statement, we've got to answer that question, why do we want to lead in the first place? I had so many bad bosses early and so many few bosses. I'm a big believer that you can learn as much or more from the bad boss, because I found myself saying, I'll never do that, I'll never do that, I'll never do that. And then at the time I became a formal leader, when you eliminate all these different behaviors and actions and attitudes and negative energy, what's left is a good foundation. Self-awareness consists of a ton of different areas. All right, and you could go back and look at all these different areas later, but a couple things I want us to be very aware of is, what is our energy, what is our body language, and where are our emotions at? We'll dive deeper into the emotions. We'll dive deeper. What is our mindset? The good thing about mindset is mindset's a choice. It might be a tough choice, but it's a choice. And when we decide and we get intentional about what kind of a mindset we want to show up with, like earlier we were talking about holding people accountable versus holding them capable, and intentionally embracing that mindset. It doesn't mean that people miss deadlines and there isn't accountability. It's just our intent, because our mindset's to hold them capable, is how do we lift them up so that doesn't happen anymore? Right? Holding people capable isn't about not having expectations and making sure people meet them, and performance objectives and not, make sure people need them, but it's about coming at it from a different way and a different lens. What are our attitudes, values? What are our biases? Good, bad, or indifferent, we all have biases. They're based on our values, they're based on our beliefs, our past experiences, our interactions. And we've got to understand what those things are. Strengths, skills, weaknesses. That's the activity we're getting ready to dive into. I think most of you probably agree. It's been talked about so much, but it's why I really like the Clifton Strengths Assessment, is I believe we need to focus on our people's strengths and really enhance those and grow those, and then look to mitigate our weaknesses. Grow on our strengths, on what we bring, mitigate our weaknesses. Jim Collins talks about, first we got to get the right people on the bus, then we got to get them in the right seat on the bus. If we have people who have certain weaknesses, we can't think that necessarily, we can mitigate them, but thinking that those are going to become their strengths, that's going to be a journey. But when we leverage the strengths that they have, the way we can accelerate the impact of that is very good. What are our languages of appreciation? How do we like feedback? The awareness, introvert versus extrovert. I used to think, I don't anymore, I used to think that extroverts were better leaders. I don't believe that anymore. It doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert, but understanding how we process information, understanding what types of environments we thrive in is key. My buddy Dave, I talked to you about him earlier, the miscommunication about, taking the boat, to Minnesota via the Mississippi. He is an introvert. There's a lot of times I got to pull the words out of him when we're close. He's one of the best leaders I've ever met. They are moving him around the country with big bonuses to go fix the buildings who aren't performing. And he's won Distribution Center of the Year like 8 or 9 different times. His ability to establish relationships, connect with people, his why for leading, his connection to purpose. But it's just important for us to know, where do we fall on that? So, our Clifton Strengths Assessment. The Clifton Strengths Assessment has 34 strengths. They're broken down into these categories: executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. All right? I don't know that I saw anybody that had the exact same top 5. We've tried to separate you to have a diversity of these strengths. My strengths, I had it here, and then I think I got them memorized, but I'll pull it out. So my top 5 are strategic, belief, arranger, futuristic, and I forget the 5th one right now. All right. And the interesting thing to me, so I went to this training a little over a year ago. I took this assessment, I looked at it. I didn't really dig into it till I got to the training, probably like most of us, right? Everybody's busy. But I was surprised at how well it nailed me, but I was also surprised by a few other things. I would have told you empathy would have been in my top 5. It's 8. But the cool thing about this assessment, as we begin to dig into that here in just a minute, is that it shows how we show up with this strength when we're healthy. What's that strength look like when we're at our best? But it also shows what are the opposite side of that? What are the negatives, the drawbacks, the landmines to those strengths? Strength number 34 for me is consistency. That means it's not really a strength, but I try to find ways to be more consistent. I talked earlier about the yo-yo and committing to fitness and weight and things like that. But it's identifying. And then when we know the things that fall more towards a weakness, we're able to mitigate and do things to offset that. All right, so what we want to do is take 10, maybe 15 minutes. I don't want to, as we adjust the afternoon, I do not want to short this component of it. So take 10 or 15 minutes, and I would encourage you to get up from your seat, to go to different areas of the building. Just because it's right after lunch, I feel it too. We ate, we're in here, right? And sit and take 10 to 15 minutes and take a deep dive into your top 5. So take notes on key aspects of the theme so you can explain it to your group. And this is within your book as well. How does this theme contribute to your success? Think about some specific examples of how it's showing up in your day-to-day leadership. What things about it surprised you? I was very surprised. I would have never guessed that strategic would have been my number 1 strength. But the way I lean into that strength now more than ever has changed so many things for me. How could the theme get in the way of your success? Give an example of how this theme's created that challenge. What surprised you from the top 5? What confirmed what you already thought? So let's take 15 minutes. Let's go take a deep dive. It's on your phone, it's on your computer. Look through those. Come to these things, and we'll come back and we'll work together in our small groups. All right? And I do encourage you, get up, move around, sit somewhere different so we get out of this room a little bit.